this concept of a control group, like in a clinical trial. So
Hmm.
this is the group that's normal. We're going to have these people just go through daily life, and we're going to compare them to people who frequently use cannabis, and then see what difference there is. And then at the end, whatever difference there is, we'll say, oh, it must be because of cannabis, because we controlled everything else. Well, what does that really mean? If you
Hmm.
controlled everything else, you didn't really control anything. I mean, maybe the people that were in the control group did not use any cannabis. Yeah, let's assume that they did. There's the first assumption that they did not, consume any cannabis. But what does that mean? Did they not consume any other psychotropics? Okay, you need to redesign the experiment. Okay, no psychotropics. Okay, great. So you're not going to consume any psychotropics. So now we'll see that, what effect does the use of psychotropic cannabis have on people compared to so-called normal control people? But wait a minute, those normal controlled people, how many of those people are starting every day with, coffee and sugar? A lot of them. And so are those normal humans? Are they the same as the people that I lived with in the rainforest, the Amazon, the Congo, Tanzania, Australian outback, who have never had coffee? you know, and who knows any person, who's never had coffee? Never, ever, ever. I mean, I rarely drink coffee, but I have had coffee. And imagine how different the world would be if we had a real control group. If we said, okay, we're going to have, 10,000 people in London or whatever, we're going to pay them to not drink coffee for a whole year. And that'll be our control group. And then we'll have this other group of people that aren't going to change anything. And those are just regular Londoners. And then we have this other 10,000 people that are going to be like regular Londoners, plus they consume cannabis. So then you start to see kind of how there's a lot of variables in there.
Mm.
And science, in order to come to a conclusion, you have to reduce the number of variables down to very few, typically, ideally one, or maybe one or two. And because every time there's another variable, people will say, well, I noticed that you did your study during COVID. It's like, oh crap. So everything's kind of out the window. Okay. And, you did your study in London and not in other parts of the UK. You didn't do anything in rural areas. It's like, yeah, well, no, because to compare these people. So is a person who lives in a city like London really normal? If you compare them, say, to a farmer, maybe being a farmer is a more normal human way. And then what does that mean? Normal is like, well, if you graph all the people on the planet, how many people live in cities and how many people live in, kind of rural or agrarian sorts of environments? Well, the majority of people, according to the statistics, live in cities. Yeah, but that's artificial. So then that person might say the natural human existence is like people that live in the Serengeti Plain or in the Amazon rainforest or the Eskimos. And again, that's just personal preference and personal choice. But yeah, sure, a city is an artificial environment. But so do you want to compare the person, 10,000 people in London, excuse me, to 10,000 Aborigines or Aboriginal people, because maybe the term Aborigine is considered pejorative now, but Aboriginal people or Indigenous people in Australia? So, and since it's Australia, we'll say, okay, 10,000 people in Sydney, and then 10,000 people that are of this Aboriginal group. Oh, but what about genetic factors? 10,000 people in Sydney is going to be multi-ethnic. 10,000 of them, they're kind of all from the same, group. It's like, well, are you sure? Have you checked their DNA? They just, well, they look alike. We'll see. So we haven't even checked. So there's all of these potentials. So in order to really just say that the only difference was that these people were smoking cannabis and these people weren't, you've got to make a lot of assumptions about what is the same, what is the same, what is the same, and lump things into category and call things insignificant or irrelevant and excipients and minor cannabinoids and inactive molecules. And the next thing you know, the pile of things that you've thrown out to ignore is bigger than what you're left with, because all you're left with is, yeah, CBD and THC. So all the activity in cannabis basically can be summed up into the psychoactive and the non-psychoactive. And of course, psychoactive is THC and non-psychoactive is CBD. And CBD is really great for all sorts of problems that people have, ranging from inflammatory bowel disease to depression and anxiety. And some people even feel that it helps with cancer, whereas THC is more for, and you hear these kind of
Hmm.
narratives and everyone's like, oh, so that's what it is. Wrong. They're twins. CBD and THC as molecules are actually twins. They're not identical twins, but they're like what are called fraternal or sororal twins that aren't identical, but they look very similar. And so it's like, one twin has blonde hair and the other one has brown hair. But otherwise than that, if you put a hat on them, nobody can tell them apart. So cannabis, THC, and CBD are made up of the exact same parts. They're just slightly organized differently. And so much so that, kind of like twins that like to trick people, if you take the brown haired twin and bleach his hair blonde and send him to a party that his twin brother was invited to and he wasn't, everybody's going to treat him as though he was this other twin. And everybody will react to him as though he was psychotropic, right? Well, so CBD you can easily convert in an acidic solution to THC. It has no issue. It's not going to say, dude, I don't go there. That's my brother. My brother's like that. He likes to get high. He likes to sleep all day, lay on the couch. Me, I'm CBD. I go to work. I actually have improved cognitive function, and I'm a Boy Scout. It's like, but that's us projecting our cultural paradigms onto these two molecules to identify them as being distinct and separate. And so even though CBD was discovered first and isolated first, um, in the 60s and 70s and all that, THC was the holy grail because everybody's thinking of marijuana, cannabis, as something that people use to get high.